Have you ever wondered, when you've gone through most of your life, should you still believe in love? Some people say that love is only for youth, where the heart is still beating fast, eyes are still sparkling, and hope is still full. But actually, the heart never grows old. No matter what age we are, people always yearn to be touched by tenderness, to be loved, and to feel that they are still valuable. I want to tell you a story. A man in his 70s with gray hair, slightly hunched back, but still warm eyes. He spent his whole life with full responsibilities. Being a father, being a husband, being a kind son. When his wife died, he thought the rest of his life would just be quiet afternoon tea sessions and morning walks with old shoes. Until he met a bright, fresh woman who made him feel his heart pounding once again. Everyone told him to be careful, that love at this age is a luxury. But he didn't listen, because deep down, he just wanted to be loved again, not to satisfy, not to hold, but simply to feel that I am still a man who can care, can protect, can give love. You see, no matter who we are, no matter how old we are, we all need to be connected. No one is born to be lonely. But the most difficult thing is not to love, but to love without losing yourself. Because sometimes people enter love with a heart full of trust, but leave with a heart full of scratches. Not because love is wrong, but because they have sacrificed too much hoping to be accepted. So is love in your twilight years worth it? The answer does not lie in age, but in the way we choose to love. And from this story, I believe that true love, even if it comes late, is still the greatest gift. If it makes you see yourself as a complete person, not a shrunken version just to please others. In the early stages of a relationship, things are often beautiful. I believe all of us have experienced that feeling, the thrill of seeing a text message appear, the smile that cannot be hidden when thinking of that person, or the way our heart beats just because of a gentle handshake. Each conversation seems to last forever. Each look contains thousands of unsaid things. And then we start dreaming about something more lasting and deeper. I still remember the feeling of going out to dinner with that person for the first time, not because of the delicious food, but because of the way that person looked at me as if there was no one else in the world. Every word, every gesture is observed and stored as a small memory that we cannot forget. At that time, people often try to show their best, neat, sophisticated, and considerate, to hope the other person feels safe and appreciated. However, the interesting thing is, while we are busy trying to become the perfect version, we also gradually reveal our very real desires. We want to be loved, recognized, and accompanied, not just because of sweet words, but because we see in the other person a presence that makes us feel secure. In the early stages, dopamine in us is strongly active. Everything is new, attractive, and easily sublime. Just a simple text, "What are you doing?" enough to make me happy all day. Curiosity, the desire to explore, and the belief that maybe this is the person I've been looking for so long, make us live in a very lively state, full of hope. But because of that, it's easy for us to get carried away. When dopamine is high, we often ignore small signals, silences between conversations, things that are not completely clear. We only see what we want to see: a kind person, a warm feeling, a beautiful future. I used to be like that. I used to think that if I was gentle enough and patient enough, that person would stay forever. But then I realized in the early stages, it shouldn't be the time for us to sacrifice. It's time for us to observe. Is that person really listening when we speak? Do you remember small details about yourself? Are you proactively creating moments of connection? And most importantly, can we be ourselves when we are with them? A beautiful beginning is not necessarily a perfect ending, but an honest beginning where both partners not only want to make an impression, but also want to understand each other deeply, can be a solid foundation for a long-term relationship. So if you're in the early stages, just enjoy the vibes, but don't forget to listen to yourself too. What is your heart saying? Do you feel respected, accepted, able to be yourself? If so, that's a good sign. If not, gently ask yourself, am I hastily giving trust when everything is still not very clear? Love doesn't need to be urgent. What comes from calm, genuine presence is what can stay the longest in the heart. There are times when things don't fall apart in the first place. It starts with very small, very faint things. But if you are observant enough and honest with your own feelings, you will realize that something is changing. These signs are often not clear or noisy. They are like long, silent drizzles, but enough to wet the soul if we continue to pretend not to see them. I remember one time when I was in a relationship that I had high hopes for, I started to notice that my partner was replying to my messages less and less. It's not that there's no answer, it's a colder answer. Questions that were once full of concern suddenly became short, social sentences. I thought to myself, he must be busy. Then, when the appointment was canceled at the last minute without any apology, I told myself, everyone is tired at times. But repeated too many times, those excuses are no longer enough to appease. Sometimes you'll notice that your crush is no longer excited to ask about your day, no longer want to share about their stories. The connection gradually becomes one way, and even though you still try to nurture it, you start to feel tired and lonely in the relationship you have. These warning signs do not lie when people suddenly disappear, but when they begin to appear superficially. There are no more warm eyes when looking at you, no more attentive listening. You tell a very personal, very emotional story, but only receive a nod, then silence. I think what makes a person heartbroken is not being directly hurt, but the feeling of gradually being abandoned without anyone speaking up. It feels like you have to try so hard to keep the connection, while the other person seems to have let go a long time ago without even saying anything. Dopamine can cause you to delay the truth. You still remember those brilliant early days. You still hope that it was just a difficult period. You still want to believe that if you try a little harder, everything will go back to the way it was. But my friend, real love shouldn't make us constantly doubt our own feelings. If you find yourself falling into a cycle of making excuses for inconsiderate actions, feeling increasingly lonely around that person, struggling to be good enough, interesting enough, lovable enough, then maybe it's time to stop and ask yourself, are you in love with an old version of them, or an image that you built yourself? Love shouldn't be a game of hide and seek. It shouldn't be something you have to run after to be seen and heard. It's where you can stay still be yourself, and still be loved completely. These warning signs come to remind you, stay alert, not to end it right away, but so that you start to listen to your true feelings inside, so that you know that you deserve to be loved with a feeling that is warm enough, clear enough, and sincere enough. There are times when you will ask yourself, is love really like this? I clearly remember a moment in my relationship when everything seemed to be at a breaking point. The efforts to maintain, the times to reconcile, the efforts to regain the old feeling all suddenly no longer had meaning. It's like when you're climbing a mountain, seemingly only one step away from the top. But in the end you discover that you're just standing at a lower place where you've lost a lot of energy and gotten nothing in return. I remember my conversations with that person. Every time I shared my feelings, I didn't receive the same sympathy as before. Instead, there were just short answers and cursory nods. At first I thought maybe he was busy, but then the silence lasted. Everything gradually became blurred. The times he promised to change, to pay more attention, but never actually did. As time passed, I realized that I was no longer a priority in his life. And then there was a moment, as I stood there, looking into his eyes, I realized that I could no longer see the image of the person I once loved. Not because he changed, but because I changed. I no longer felt important in his eyes, and it made me feel like everything was falling apart. There are times when I wonder, why do I have to live in a relationship where I always have to sacrifice so much, while the other person doesn't care much? Why keep a relationship that no longer has true connection just because of fear of loneliness, fear of change? At that moment, I understood that what I was afraid of was not loneliness, but unreality. I'm afraid of living in a relationship just out of habit, without feeling true love. This feeling is strange, isn't it? When you give all your mind and emotions to someone, but receive nothing but emptiness. It feels like you're giving a part of yourself without getting anything in return, as if love isn't something you both cultivate, but an unbalanced exchange. Dopamine. You may have heard this name in many stories about the feeling of excitement when falling in love. about the joy of receiving attention. But when the relationship becomes lacking in sincerity, dopamine is no longer something to hold you back. It no longer brings a feeling of joy when you look into that person's eyes, but only emptiness and boredom. And then disillusionment occurred. When I realized that I no longer felt truly happy, I was forced to face the fact that maybe I was spending too much time on things that were no longer meaningful. I suddenly understood that love is not about sacrificing your all. It's not about trying so hard for someone that you forget about yourself. Love is connection, respect, and care for each other. In those moments of disillusionment, I realized that real love is not about waiting for someone to change, but about knowing when you need to stop to protect yourself. True love will never make you feel like you have to sacrifice yourself to be loved. It comes from sincerity, from mutual understanding and respect. And when you realize this, you will understand that you are worthy of love and respect, not because you have to change, but because you are who you are. When the relationship is no longer where you find peace, when you only feel lonely even when you're with that person, that's when you have to stand up and love yourself. So I decided to stop, to start loving again from the beginning, loving myself before loving someone else. Surely you have experienced the painful feeling when a relationship in which you have invested a lot of enthusiasm and love suddenly collapses. That feeling, like you're standing in the middle of a pile of rubble, not knowing where to start. I used to be like that too. There was a time when I felt like I was no longer myself. All I can do is continue to live in a relationship that has no life left, no joy left, only pain that cannot be expressed in words. But then I realized something important. No one can heal you if you don't start with yourself. I started the journey to find myself, not to wait for a miracle or someone to save me, but to face the wounds in my heart so that I could heal each of those wounds. And that was when I understood that the healing journey is not a race, but a long process, full of challenges, but also full of hope. My journey starts with small steps. I don't force myself to change immediately, but allow myself to feel every emotion, every thought, every sadness that remains in my soul. I allowed myself to cry when I needed to, allowed myself to feel loss when it was something I needed to experience. The most important thing is that I no longer avoid my emotions. I began to love myself, not with the standards imposed by society, but with love and acceptance of myself exactly as I am. Part of that journey is learning to let go. Let go of things that no longer serve me. Let go of relationships that no longer make me happy. And most importantly, let go of the unrealistic expectations I placed on myself. I used to think I had to always be strong, always perfect, always please others. But when I stopped trying to do all those things, I realized that true strength comes from facing my weaknesses and accepting them. I started focusing on the things that brought me true joy, hobbies that I had forgotten, dreams that I thought were unattainable. I go for walks in the park, spend time reading, learn new skills, and even spend more time taking care of my body and mind. I no longer lived in the darkness of the past, but began to look forward with hope. I understand that this journey is not a race, but a process of rediscovering yourself, loving yourself, and taking step by step. One of the important things I learned on this journey is forgiveness. Forgive myself for wasting too much time in an unworthy relationship. Forgive those who have hurt me. And most of all, forgive yourself for not properly recognizing your own value in the past. I realize that when we cannot forgive, we bind ourselves to unnecessary pain. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, but letting go so that we can move forward without being held back by the past. I also understand that no one can heal you but yourself. The love and care of others is important, but it is you who can bring about your own healing. You need to learn to love yourself, learn to accept the hurt, and gradually heal yourself. And after all I've been through, I've realized something important. The healing journey is never easy. It requires patience, acceptance, and unconditional love for yourself. But once you start walking that path, you will find that you are stronger than ever, and you will learn to love life and yourself again. Remember, you don't have to go alone. This journey is yours, and you deserve all the good things in life. When I look back at my own journey, I realize there are many profound lessons that I have learned along the way to find myself after being hurt. Every lesson, no matter how small or big, is an integral part of my growth. And I want to share them with you, because I believe they can also help you if you're on the path to healing and finding yourself. First, I learned that there's nothing wrong with needing time to heal. Many times we force ourselves to get over the pain. But the reality is that we need time to feel and resolve it. I used to think I needed to be strong right away. But when I allowed myself to feel the pain, allowed myself to be weak, I started to feel lighter. This doesn't mean I live forever in pain, but I do allow myself the space to face and process my emotions in a healthy way. Giving yourself time to recover is not only necessary, but also the only way for you to be able to walk more firmly on the road ahead. Another lesson I learned was about forgiveness, not only with others, but also with myself. The cost of not forgiving is huge. It was a burden that I carried for a long time, making my soul tired. I used to think that forgiveness meant forgetting, but gradually I realized that forgiveness is not for others, but to free yourself. When I learned to forgive, I felt much lighter, as if the burdens I had been carrying were lifted. And it's a process. It doesn't happen in a day or two, but as long as you are ready, you will feel the change. The third lesson I learned is the importance of being true to yourself. Before, I always tried to please others, doing everything so that no one would complain about me. But I realized that not only did it make me tired, but it also made me lose myself. Being true to yourself doesn't mean being selfish. It means knowing your limits and understanding that you have the right to be happy in your own way. I learned how to set boundaries, say no when needed, and not feel guilty about it. Being true to myself helps me feel more free and is also an important part of finding joy and peace. Another important lesson I learned is loving myself. I used to think that loving yourself was too selfish, but I realized that loving yourself is the most basic thing for you to be able to love others. You cannot give away what you don't have. When I learn to take care of myself and love myself, I can bring love to those around me completely and sincerely. And self-love is not only about actions like taking care of your body, but also about accepting your weaknesses, not blaming yourself or looking down on yourself for past mistakes. Ultimately, the biggest lesson I learned is that life doesn't always go according to plan, and that's normal. My heart has been hurt because of expectations that didn't come true, because of things that weren't what I expected. But when I accepted that life is sometimes unexpected, has twists and turns that we cannot predict, I began to feel more at peace. I learned to accept things that haven't happened yet, and instead of worrying, I opened my heart to new opportunities. I'm not perfect, but with every step I take, every day that passes, I feel like I'm becoming a better version of myself. And I want you to remember, you do too. The lesson I share isn't anything too complicated, but it can change your life if you're willing to accept it. We all deserve a happy life, a life where we love ourselves and know how to be true to our emotions. Because when you do, you will create a life worth living, not only for yourself, but also for those around you. Finally, after everything you've been through, I want you to remember that every road, whether bumpy or smooth, has its own value. Each of us has our own stories, our own pain, and memorable moments that we will carry with us for the rest of our lives. And most importantly, all of those things contribute to shaping the person you are becoming. Life is not always easy. Sometimes we will encounter challenges that we never imagined. But I want you to understand that it is in those difficult times that we have the opportunity to grow. Sometimes it's only when we face pain, loss, or failure that we truly see the strength within us. That's when we realize we can take control of our lives. We can love ourselves again and start again. Don't let past failures define you. Don't let fear or doubt stop you from believing in your own abilities. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be yourself. When you learn to love yourself and accept your mistakes, you will find life becomes much easier. That's how you can create a happy and peaceful life, not only for yourself, but also for those around you. Remember, we cannot control everything, but we can control how we face life's challenges. You can choose to be true to yourself, choose to love and cherish the present moments, instead of living in the past or worrying about the future. Life is not a race, but a journey where you need to enjoy every step. And in that journey, never forget that you deserve joy and happiness. You deserve to be loved and appreciated. Whether it's the little things or the big milestones in life, they all have value. Every day is a new opportunity for you to renew yourself, learn, and move forward. Look in the mirror and see yourself gradually becoming a stronger, better person. Don't hesitate to love yourself, because when you love yourself, you will have the strength to love others. You will realize how simple and peaceful life can be when you stay true to yourself. And when you can share that with those around you, you'll see the connection, warmth, and joy it brings. Finally, always remember that you are never alone on this journey. Each of us can make a difference in our own lives and in the lives of others. Never stop believing in yourself, because you deserve to live a meaningful and happy life. You just need to dare to believe, dare to walk, and dare to love. Start from today, from yourself, and good things will come.